Welcome to the Gemsbach. This video is about Let the Right One In, a 2008 film directed by Tomas Alfredson. The career of Tomas Alfredson is in an odd place at the moment. In the 12 years since he received international acclaim for directing Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, Alfredson has helmed a critically panned thriller called The Snowman, a poorly regarded 15th entry in a popular Swedish comedy franchise, and a small group of well-regarded but seldom viewed short films. Browsing through his filmography makes it seem like the poor performance of The Snowman torpedoed his upward trajectory. I, for one, sincerely hope that's either untrue or at least that the damage isn't permanent, because I consider Alfredson to be a great artist. But as much as I appreciate Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, that's not the film that would make me personally lament if he's never trusted with a risky project again. Rather, it's the movie he made directly before that one which made a deeper impression on me. A tense and weird and wonderful little horror drama called Let the Right One In. In order to account for my love of it, I'll be zeroing in here on two standout aspects of this masterpiece: its odd central characters and its clever cinematography. If you haven't seen this movie, and you don't mind a little blood, I want this video to convince you to watch it.
Men där visste vi till exempel att branden hade blivit anlagd för att dölja det faktum att personen som bodde där hade blivit mördad innan. Hur kunde vi veta det? Jo, ja.
För att det inte fanns någon rök i lungorna.
Let the Right One In does not skimp on the tension, violence, and horror that accompany its drama. But unlike so many movies that contain those same elements, its characters are nuanced, subtle, and, despite the fantasy elements, I would not hesitate to say, realistic. They're never reduced to archetypes. Their motivations are messy and unconventional, but nonetheless understandable. In particular, the film centers on the meeting and developing relationship of two characters, a vampire named Ellie and a human named Oscar, both about 12 years old, at least in a developmental sense. And their relationship is almost the reverse of what you might expect based on their respective, species. Far from monstrous, Ellie is a soft-spoken, tragic figure who prefers not to kill when possible. And far from innocent, Oscar is obsessed with news reports of grisly murders, and spends his spare time fantasizing about torturing or murdering the bullies at his school. It impresses me whenever the lead actors of a horror movie give truly compelling performances. But for actors as young as the lead pair in Let the Right One In to provide such phenomenal acting is endlessly commendable. Lina Leandersson's performance, so full of quiet, knowing looks and maturity, makes Ellie's true age and breadth of experiences believable, and Cora Hedebrand provides a perfect balance of sadism and naivety, restraining jubilation when violence is visited on his tormentors, and yet awkward in pursuing his friendship and eventual romance with Ellie. Now, not to discredit the work of those two actors, but the facilitation and realization of such young talent must also lend esteem to their director. And on top of that, I would be remiss if I did not mention Jon Lindqvist as praiseworthy in this context, given that he is the author of not only the original novel on which the film is based, but also the screenplay adaptation. Now, regardless of where the credit ultimately falls, the characters bring a twist to the genre. And it's a twist that is well demonstrated by carefully considering the portent of the film's title, Let the Right One In. Initially, it seems to be an admonishment to be careful who you invite into your home, a reference to vampires needing to be invited into a property to enter, which is a phenomenon that features prominently at the beginning of a key scene in the film. Yet as the film has demonstrated prior to that scene, and demonstrates again in that scene, letting Ellie into one's home is not necessarily the wrong move. Ellie protects people they care about from their vampiric urges, as evidenced by the scene in which Oscar slits his hand. So it's not a practical error to let Ellie in, and Ellie even hopes to avoid participating in the requisite violence, as evidenced by the scene after Håkan first fails to retrieve blood. So strictly speaking, it's not a moral error to let Ellie in either. It makes more sense then to think of the title as a warning for Ellie, rather than a warning for those that encounter them. That is, it could refer to letting someone in the sense of choosing someone to trust. To reduce risk, violence, and loneliness, it's necessary for Ellie to become close and even intimate with dangerous people. People like their initial familiar, Håkan. People like Oscar.
Jag dödar inte folk.
Nej. Men du skulle vilja. Om du kunde.
för att hämnas. Eller hur? Jo.
For the uninitiated, perhaps it's concerning that it would be accurate to call Let the Right One In an adolescent vampire romance movie. There is, of course, another film that fits that bill, and which also released in 2008. Yet I can hardly conceive of two films more far apart in reality. This is well-trodden ground by now, so I don't think it will shock anyone when I say Twilight is an overwhelmingly dry and boring work. A movie with flat, grey cinematography, schoolyard-level writing, and emotionless acting. Now, you've already heard some of my praise for the writing and acting of Let the Right One In the prior section. But as for cinematography, Let the Right One In doesn't let its brooding subject matter turn it grey. It's instead a film dominated by three sharply contrasting colors: pure white, pure black, and bright red. The coldness and hostility of the movie's universe is captured in the look of it no less than in characters like Håkan, Connie, and Oscar. Shots throughout the film linger on snow falling through the air, snow and sleet resting on the ground, and pale ice with openings used to threaten children and conceal corpses. This builds in the viewer a desire for warmth of both body and spirit. And given that all such chilling circumstances are bright white, it's ironically in darkness that we seek and find that welcoming warmth. The warmth of a mother and son simply brushing their teeth, of a group of friends spending time together, or of two people lying in a bed. Just as a vampire abhors the light of day and clings to the shadows, so the audience finds emotional refuge in dark interior spaces in the film. Yet such dark, inviting scenarios are not as safe as they seem, for their interiority contains a different kind of threat. An internal threat, the threat of red. Thin, wet, red blood that intervenes in the happiness of Ellie at fixed intervals. Thick, dry red blood that brings Oscar and Ellie together for better or worse. And red fire in which one side character chooses to be consumed. Moreover, beyond such color relationships, the cinematography is to be celebrated for the creative camera work or composition of many individual sequences in the film. A case in point is Ellie's visit to the hospital, which opens with the subtle, understated strangeness of an underdressed and shoeless child wandering out of the snow and into the frame, feet dripping, then vanishing from sight in the following shot, only to reappear in plain sight within the frame through movement alone. Similarly, scenes in which Oscar is party to acts of violence often conclude with extreme close-ups on his face, so we can see the play of the inappropriate smile that begins to form there. And its most brilliantly shot sequence of all is sadly a major spoiler. So all I'll say is that what follows the moment where Oscar begins being held underwater is an approach to displaying its subject matter that does so much with so little that it just might be the most elegantly achieved climax scene in the entire horror genre.
Vi ska ha en liten tävling nu.
With just one small asterisk for an unfortunate scene featuring a large number of computer-generated cats, there's really no aspect of Let the Right One In that isn't exceptional. I've focused my efforts here on showcasing some laudable aspects of its unique central characters and artistic visuals. Yet I could just as easily have poured praise on its satisfying overall plot arc, the foil to the main characters provided by almost every single side character, or its moody music. But covering every detail would leave nothing to discover for those of you who have reached this point in the review without having first watched the film. So if that describes you, it's time to fix that. Let the Right One In is a serious, gripping film about a strange connection that brings relief to two morose people, an old, unwilling killer and a young, vengeful loner. Both of them are technically children, and yet neither is a normal child. Now, whether you would prefer to consider it a particularly strange coming-of-age story, a particularly dark drama, or a particularly sensitive horror, at any rate, I assure you it's the right one. So let it in.
Är du död? Nej. Märks inte det?